For those of you who are all about the football on the field and sick of the talking, you know what? Here's the good news. The pinnacle, the climax of talking season, when we get the most talk, is right before the football. So it is, of course, media days across the country. We've seen the Big 12. We are in the midst of what is the marathon that the SEC brings us each and every year, 4 days from Dallas, and the Big 10 and the ACC next week. And of course, our focus on the Big 10 in Indianapolis. It will be quite interesting to see 4 new schools, 4 new coaches entering the Big 10 and what they have to say about their new league. Buckeyes Live, folks, right here at the Voice of College Football. We've done this 276 times. Steve Hellwagon was here for the very first, and lo and behold, here he is. Bucknuts 247. Steve, what's going on?
Not a whole heck of a lot. Just counting the days down till we get to Indianapolis here. We're going out Monday. Ohio State's portion will be Tuesday. And then the rest of the schools, 6 each day on Wednesday and Thursday as well. So looking forward to getting out there. I haven't got the exact schedule, so I can't tell you, exactly what time you would tune in to see Coach Day on Big Ten Network. And then obviously the breakout session that the Rever and the rest, DiNardo and everybody will be doing with the players and Coach Day, or just the players. But look for all that frivolity starting on Tuesday on the Big Ten Network, probably starting late in the morning. I would imagine 10:30 or 11 is when it'll get going. And again, counting the days down till we get out there. Just looking forward to it.
Tony Gerdeman, BuckeyeHuddle.com. Buckeye Weekly's the podcast. Lock it in on those 2 destinations, folks. Tony, how you doing?
Doing well, as Steve said. Looking forward to next week and this last week of maybe the last week of calm until who knows when. So just trying to appreciate it a little bit before it all goes away.
Comments and questions are welcome as always, folks. The Super Chat's available as well. If you hit me up on Venmo, PayPal, or Cash App, we appreciate those contributions as well. Just let me know that they are for the Ohio State show. And in many ways, a more effective way to contribute here at the Voice of College Football. But the Super Chat's available. We take your comments and questions. But first, I'm going to ask Steve and Tony what their comments and questions will be if they get enough opportunity. So understand this, folks. I know that you guys envy guys like Steve and Tony because they get access to the team. They get to talk to the coaches. They get to go to practice and all that business. But they have to be very strategic in what they're asking, because at Big Ten Media Days, you may get 1 to 2 shots. And that's for the entire league at the big podium. And then for these side sessions, there's going to be, as these guys could describe better than I, because I was only there one time for Big Ten Media Days, is that you've got, depending on the matchups, meaning what coaches are going at the same time. Of course, Harbaugh was completely swamped, and Ryan Day always is. You've got 100 media around them, and you've got Greg Schiano with 12 or whatever the case might be. That's just the way it is. And if they end up opposite one of the big boys at the same time, then you may have less than that, because everybody's focused on, except for their local beat writers, on the big guns. So there's only a couple shots to ask. So Steve, we'll start with you in terms of what you will ask. What are your most important questions to hit up, not just Ryan Day, across the Big Ten? And Tony, I'll ask you the same. Then I've got a follow-up that's more of a fantasy type question.
Well, yeah, I think that these events, and I've been going to them for, I guess this will be my 30th consecutive year attending the Big Ten football preseason media days, kind of evolved over time. And, we used to get the coach at the podium, which was the televised part, for about 10 or 15 minutes. And then you would also get the coach for a full hour at a breakout table. That I haven't seen the schedule yet, whether or not we're going to get a full hour with Ryan Day in addition to the podium. But, because of COVID, it's changed some of the protocols. They didn't want people to be sitting at a table, a round banquet table right, against a person, basically. So they've gone to these more mini press conference type things, and they're still good, but not maybe as good as the old days where you could have a conversation type thing with somebody you're sitting right next to and really get into some good topics. So you kind of break down your thought of what you're going for here between stuff about this team, the off season, the coaching changes, different things that have happened and transpired, and then the big picture type things like the future of the sport, the direction of the program, recruiting, all these other 5 mile up in the air topics that you try and get into. So it's kind of a blend between those type questions. Some focused on the current season and the current team, and then others just focused kind of on the coach's outlook, the coach's philosophy, the coach's experiences, anything of that nature, I suppose. I think Ryan Day is going to be besieged by Michigan questions, having lost to them 3 years in a row. And what does that mean? Does that, I'm sure, does that put added significance on this season? You'll get those hush tone type questions, that we love to hear from our friends. But, I think it's going to be a blend and a mix. Obviously, the offensive line is going to be a heavy topic. The quarterback battle is going to be a heavy topic. Splitting reps between the two running backs is going to be a good topic. Having Chip Kelly now as the offensive coordinator, what they're going to do, on defense with Jim Knowles, what's he got for an encore after a great year last year defensively? What do they have in mind? So those will be some of the bigger topics, I suppose. And, maybe a little bit about Jeremiah Smith, the true freshman wide receiver. Seems like he's ready to break all of the Ohio State freshman wide receiver records in 2 weeks, to start the season. So, is what's going to happen with that. So that'll give you an idea, kind of the lay of the land as we go into this thing, that it's a lot about the current team, a lot about, perhaps what's transpired the last 3 years, and a lot of big picture ideas, NIL, all these other things. How does that impact recruiting? No one really, we haven't gotten to the point where we're talking actual money dollars with these people just yet. But I think as time goes on, it'll become like the NFL, where you're slotting guys for the mid-level exception, and the NBA with the Larry Bird rights and all these other things, where it gets all the way down to dollars and cents. Perhaps one day that's where we'll be with college football too.
Just imagine the outrage from one segment of the coaches if one particular coach offers a 3-star, like way too much money. Now you've just completely ruined the market.
You blown the salary cap. Yeah.
But the media days are interesting because it can be the best opportunity to actually talk to a coach. Like you could just, or a player, like there are so many players with nobody around them. They're just sitting there for 45 minutes on their phones. And sometimes you feel bad about it. Like, I don't want to bother you while you're just scrolling Twitter or Instagram or whatever, because there's nobody talking to the left guard from Northwestern, but they've got to bring somebody. Coaches, there's so much coverage now. It's really hard to just go get a coach and talk to them. And you're still fighting for questions, but like with Day or Harbaugh, you can sit there and be there for 45 minutes and you're trying to get stuff in, and you've got to get the question in without trying to cut the coach off, but knowing that other people are going to cut him off. And it's some people are better at it than others. A lot of people are better at it than me in terms of just getting in there. But I'm sitting there the entire time trying to take notes as well. So you're typing and not necessarily ready to ask a question. But a lot of the questions that you're going to ask that are going to be asked have been asked, so you already know the answer. So some of this is what has changed since the spring, what is new, what needs answered, what can you talk about. Every single Michigan question has been asked. That's not going to stop them from being asked again. But you got to find the questions that haven't been answered, that you don't necessarily know the answer to. as well, I think is interesting because a lot of stuff you're going to ask these coaches, you already know the answer to, and maybe that's what you're looking for, and that's fine. But it's a lot of it is some swinging and missing as well because they're going to no sell some of these things. Like Dale'll be open and on, Dale'll be honest about Michigan, but he's not going to like get too in the weeds on it. So there'll be different things that go on. But I still remember my first one was like 2006, and as Steve said, you're just sitting around tables with a coach, and they're all going on at the same time or whatever, and sitting with Jim Tressel for, I don't know, like 60 minutes, 90 minutes. Just there's probably, I don't know, 8 to 12 of us around him. Now, what's the number of people around Day or Jim Harbaugh now? Is it 40? Is it 30, 40 in those tables and then standing around him? It's really, really difficult to get more than 1 or 2 questions in a row because you might get the leeway to get a follow-up, but not necessarily.
What I remember about last year with Harbaugh was I remember where I was standing. I remember I got a question in, and like Tony is explaining, I think most of us that have done this for a while, and I haven't done it it's been a long time since I've been in this forum on a regular basis, but back in the day, you try to be aggressive, but still a professional and still courteous, not a jerk, but you got to be somewhat aggressive to get your question in. And I couldn't even tell you what I asked Harbaugh. I got a question in, but I could tell you what I remember from Harbaugh was that somebody else who was standing near me, I think they were right next to me, asked him something, and he just had that glazed look in his eyes. And then he finally paused after the question was asked and admitted, he's like, I didn't hear anything you just said. My mind was totally off somewhere else. I didn't even hear what you said. Can you say all that again?
And
it was typical Harbaugh. It was just,
he was a real treat.
Yeah, I've stood around him. I've tried to stay there for the 45 minutes or whatever, but it was kind of exhausting because there aren't necessarily questions and answers. It's not very conversational. This was before I think things were going good. So I think that the tone changed, but when things were not going great, it was kind of just uncomfortable to be around it and knowing that the questions aren't being answered. And so you just find different guys. Like I think PJ Fleck is always good. I like the little rivalry that Scott Frost and PJ Fleck had for a little while there, where Scott Frost talked about we're not into sloganeering, and Minnesota very much is. And so some of those interesting things like that, and getting to talk to new coaches for the first time, I think is always cool too.
How much are the Michigan people going to have to deal with questions about sanctions and vacating the championship and different things like that? That's a question I think that is probably going to dog a few of them. I think the coach and the players who are there.
I don't know that anybody outside of the Ohio State sphere is even asking any of those questions anymore of Michigan. I think it seems like everybody has just moved on in terms of that. Was anybody asked at the MAC media days about Central Michigan? I don't know. Has that happened yet? Is that all by Zoom? I don't know.
I was impressed with Matt Rule. I thought he was extremely conversational and very transparent to a healthy degree. I'm sure he knows exactly what he's doing, but actually really expounds upon answers and even gives you way beyond what you asked.
That was my first time talking to him last year. And he was good.
Wayne Taylor, thank you so much for the contribution. That's very kind of you. As always, very informative. Wayne, thank you so much for the comment and for the contribution here on Buckeyes Live every Wednesday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. I'm thinking about our next show already. 11 a.m. Eastern Time, Buckeyes Live, except next week. That's why you subscribe. Hit the bell for the notifications to know when we go live, because we will have to round these guys up in the midst of Big Ten Media Days. So whenever we need to do that, we will do so. But we will have a show next week at some point. All right, Tony, we'll circle around to this one. If you get these coaches, you get these players unlimited, no holds barred. You don't have to be concerned with who else is sitting there, and you get an actual conversation. Who would you pin down? Not that I'm going to limit that, but who would you really like to talk to, and what would you ask them?
Well, I think, covering Ohio State, there's there are plenty of things to talk about, not just Ohio State, but also Michigan and everything that happened last year and the things that have happened the past few years, and what kind of like the SI thing. How deep did it go? Like, how much have you known for how long about what was going on at Michigan? That sort of thing. And of course, you get honest answers about Tony Alford leaving and things of that nature, because there's so much human drama there as well that, we hear bits and pieces from other flies on the wall, but it would be an interesting conversation to get it straight from the source, unedited, unfiltered, that sort of thing. So I think that's where I would go. But there are stories, and what Braun from Northwestern, to talk to him about everything that he's gone through, and you're there for a few months before you're the head coach. Like, stories like that are interesting, and the pressure that there's more pressure than just at Ohio State, like the pressure that is going on with Ryan Walters at Purdue, like just things like that of just existing with that. And then I think the other thing I would ask is, did you sign up for this? When you got into coaching, did you sign up for this? And I think one of the questions I was thinking about yesterday is, like, if you had known that this is what it would become, would you still make that decision today? Like, would you still go into coaching, or would you go into coaching but maybe take a different path? Because so many coaches now are basically administrators, and it's like educators that go into teaching and eventually become administrators and things like. Is this what you got into? Did you want to be an administrator? Did you want to be a CEO, or did you want your hands in the dirt? That sort of thing. And I think every coach will tell you they got into coaching to coach, but eventually you're seen as I don't know, lesser if you don't continue to strive and climb the ladder. Like, oh, you're just a lifer, you're just a lifelong position coach. Why don't you want more from yourself? And it's like, I have everything I could ever want doing what I'm doing right now. Why would I change it?
Yeah, I think Tony raises an interesting question. Of course, we're going to get the commissioner, Tony Petiti, as well. And I think obvious question for him 9 months down the road is, exactly what did you see and why did you penalize Michigan, and what's taking the NCAA so long to follow your lead and drop the hammer on these outlaws? What's going on? I think that's one. Two, from the commissioner's standpoint, what does the future hold? Where is this thing headed? You're got your TV deals basically set in stone, and you're making $1 billion a year on TV and playoff and championship game and everything else you can monetize. Like, where is this headed? I mean, how did they arrive at 20 or 22% for the athletes or whatever it's supposed to be? Like, it seems kind of an arbitrary figure. I don't know. I don't know. There's all kinds of questions. And I'm sure, again, those are the big picture things. And then I agree with Tony. I think you go to each coach and you just say, what's your take on this? And they're all going to have a different viewpoint on it, because if you're at Illinois or Indiana and suddenly you've got a pot of money that allows you to go buy players that you wouldn't ordinarily be able to get, then that's probably a good thing for you. If you're at Ohio State and you can buy players away from Alabama, as they have, 2 or 3 guys from the state of Alabama away from Alabama, that's a good thing for you. But then you turn around and you watch that Oregon has got even a bigger pot of money, and they're buying players out from underneath of you, including one from Ohio. Is this such a great system? I don't know, all the hand-wringing that goes with that. So, are we going to lose out on the Big Ten championship because Oregon outbid us? And yet our payroll is 5 times what Indiana and Illinois put out. So, what are you a have? Are you a have not? Are you, a prisoner of inertia in this new system? I mean, I don't know. There's so much. I get questions. I'm besieged by questions in my chat each week. Everybody wants me to tell them, how is this going to look? How are we going to be competitive? Well, I think you're going to be. I don't know. I don't know. What are the courts going to say about your new model? Are they going to agree? Or are they going to say, no, this doesn't pass muster either? None of your models ever have. So why should this one? So I don't know. It's going to get a little dicey, I think. And then, prepare for some turbulence.
So while we continue on this path, I'm going to extend on something that Tony was bringing to the table, and he brought up the name Ryan Walters. You could fill in the blank with a number of guys. So I think there's this thought process among most college football fans that it's only the Urban Meyers and the Nick Sabans that just want to win with every ounce in their being, and that does not exist for anyone who doesn't achieve at that level. Well, I think all these guys are extremely competitive. They may not have the skill or may not have the leadership ability to get to that level, or did not get the right break or the right avenue or the right path. But yeah, you bring up like a Ryan Walters. He's still running a multi-million-dollar football operation. The pressure isn't what it is elsewhere, but the expectations of this are different, and he doesn't have the resources, but he's still running a big-time football program. So if he, just using him as an example, and we could fill in the blank with all sorts of guys, if he burns with that much passion to win and is that competitive, when he shows up at the football facility every day, doing everything he can to succeed, but having this in the back of his mind that I can only do so much here, I have limitations. It's not like I have thoughts of winning a Big Ten championship, being a major player on the national stage. At some point, is that a little debilitating, thinking, I just want to win half my games, just want to survive, just want to make it, just want to not be embarrassed.
You want to do well enough to get the next job. And that's what the Purdue is. That's what, that's why I say, like, Iowa landing a lifer, Michigan State had a lifer, Oklahoma State has found a lifer. Like if these programs that, and I guess they're higher level than a Purdue or an Indiana, certainly, but you need that lifer. I thought Nebraska had it with Scott Frost, and he was not the answer. And I don't know if Matt Rule is. I think he's the answer as long as he wants to be. But like somebody like that, how long is he going to be around? I think with Ryan Walters and guys like him, now you have you're not going to win the Big Ten, but you can make the playoffs. Like you can vie for the playoffs. I think guys like Ryan Walters and everybody in the West had thoughts that we can win the West, and then whatever happens in the Big Ten championship, maybe you sneak something out there. But now that that's gone, you still have the playoff opportunity. So you only need to be one of the 3 or 4 best teams in the Big Ten, which I think is an achievable thing. But also, I think even Purdue's not lying to themselves. They know this is a stepping stone job. A lot of places are a stepping stone job. I think maybe Illinois has their lifer now in Brett Bielema because he's gone and failed elsewhere. And I think if you can get that rebound guy, they're a lot more likely to stick around because they've grabbed for the brass ring at Arkansas and fell flat. Now you come back to the Big Ten's Arkansas, and maybe you're going to be happy with there. So, and Walters being a younger guy, like he certainly wants more and more and more. But the players have the same attitude, though. With the college football video game coming out, like it used to be that you had to worry about losing your players if you're running a dynasty. You'd worry about losing your players by not playing them. Now you may be playing them too much and increasing their value. And the transfer portal comes and takes them. And so the transfer portal is the thing with the coaches, with the players. You're there, but you're always looking for something more, something better, something bigger, and more money.
And then you've got a guy like James Franklin, who's in a fairly unique position. Maybe you could liken him to a Brian Kelly, possibly. Mm-hmm. But in this league, he's unique in that he's achieved a lot. He's accomplished a lot. He's built a very consistent, high-level program to a certain extent. However, he hasn't garnered much respect. Like the typical college football fan and maybe even media member doesn't have a ton of respect for him from the standpoint of achieving. We're a gold medal society and everything else is not good enough. So how much we're talking about having that conversation with somebody, no holds barred. You get to hear everything. You wonder how much that bothers him. He has to know that he's just kind of held at this certain level of respect in the sport, and that's what he's viewed as.
Yeah, an 18-team league, there's going to get a lot of people who get lost in the shuffle. And, maybe 3 in a given year will make the playoff, and the other 14 or 15 are going to be sitting there, looking at themselves like, how did we fail? And maybe get a bowl game like the Citrus Bowl or Gator Bowl or something like that to kind of validate yourself. But, and I hope that those games continue to be reasonably well watched, that just because of the playoff and all the hype that's going to go around the playoff, that people will still tune into some of those other games. But the fact remains that, if you're not a perennial playoff program, you're going to be viewed as a second-class citizen. And what's to say 10 years from now that collection of perennial playoff schools don't organize their own Zoom call and say, the hell with everybody else. Let's just play our own master series, for all the money and, whatever, and do away with everybody else. So they've already taken the first step toward that. So, does Georgia really need Vanderbilt? Does Ohio State really need Northwestern or Indiana? No, not really. So, is this the first step toward that 10 years from now that they finally address the elephant in the room, that it's socialized college football, and we can eliminate all the have-nots and have more money for ourselves. So I don't know. It's interesting to think about.
I just think that the gap in attention and interest in the playoff versus the rest of the bowl season is going to widen exponentially with this 12-team playoff. I think there was at least this respect for teams that made the New Year's Six to say, well, to make the Final Four is really, really tough. Therefore, we understand if you're a good 10-2 team and you made a New Year's Six bowl and you had a nice season and you're really good. But if you can't make a 12-team playoff, I think there's just a perception that's going to exist out there among the standard college football fan that you're really not that good. So why would we want to watch you play?
Yeah, that's a great point.
I mean, it's not going to be good enough for some programs, and it'll be good enough at first. And really, like Glenn Mason took Minnesota to places they hadn't been in, 40 years or whatever. But they eventually wanted more, and so they fired him, and it didn't work out. I think it's best to know your place when you are certain programs, but how satisfied will Penn State fans be finally making the playoffs, but not getting out of the Elite Eight or whatever, not getting into the Final Four still? You couldn't do it when it was a Final Four. Now that there's a playoff, you're eventually going to get tired and frustrated by only getting so far. Like Chris Holtmann not getting past the first round of the NCAA tournament. It's not going to be a marker other than a scarlet letter. In fact, for some, it's like, oh, you couldn't get past this point. You made it, but you couldn't get past this point. And so I think a lot of coaches most coaches, I think all coaches love the fact that they can now get there. But now that you can get there, you're going to have to do something while you're there, or else for some programs like a Penn State, like certainly Ohio State, Georgia, Clemson, you've got to do something while you're there, or else it's just teasing people, and eventually that gets old.
And I think Penn State in particular, let's say they're showing up as a 7 seed and 8 seed every year, and for the first couple of years, they lose that game. And to your point, Tony, I think there's going to be some excitement among the fan base. Obviously, leading into the game, there's going to be a month build up to say, hey, we made the playoff, or 3-week build up. We made the playoff. We've never done this before. This is exciting. But once they lose that game, sure, there will be, depending on how they perform, I think that's going to have something to do with it, at least initially. Did they lose 35-10, or was it a 31-28 nail biter against Tennessee? And we showed that we can at least play a decent game. But the reality of it's going to be for anyone reasonable to say, we didn't do anything different this year than we've done 5 or 6 times in the last 10 years anyway. Just the system changed. We're no different. We haven't really achieved anything. We're just in a different system.
Well, you could have a guy go win a couple of games in the playoffs, and now instead of a 9-win team, you're an 11-win team. And how can you fire somebody after an 11-win season? That sort of thing. And it does. I think it provides some security, but it also puts them out in the open as well, and it creates expectations. The playoffs itself has created an expectation, and now it has included more players, more teams, more coaches, and you have to meet those expectations. And then after meeting the expectations, you need to start exceeding them, because the expectations, once you get to some level, the expectations go higher, and if you don't get there, then you're falling short. And it doesn't matter if you make the playoffs every year if you just continue to lose while you're in it. Like, Lincoln Riley needs to do something at some point in the playoffs, and can't just lose in the first round and be everybody's bye like he was at Oklahoma. And so I think it's overall, I think it's an improvement. I don't, it takes away from the bowl games. What bowl game did Northwestern play in last year? What bowl game did Iowa play in? Like, there's Mark, you're one of the few that still cares. You're one of the few.
I was going to jump on those answers.
Right. It's like, I don't know,
Pinch Strike Bowl
and the Alamo Bowl. I don't know. Like, and I'm one of the people, probably because too often we're covering the bowl games and I'm trying to watch bowl games, but not always able to do so. But bowl games have been dying since the BCS, and ESPN's trying to keep them alive by adding more and more. And I think they've done some harm in trying to add so many bowl games to the picture, because then it just becomes more noise and it lessens the impact of every other bowl game, in my opinion.
Shane Beamer, South Carolina head coach at SEC Media Days this week, was talking repeatedly about the 12-team playoff. Well, he wouldn't have talked about the playoffs before. And in South Carolina, I think they could lose 55-0 in the playoffs and they'll be throwing parades.
Right.
But to your point, Tony, 2 or 3 times you can do that. And then, okay, no more of that. You need to do something.
Better to not make the playoffs.
Yes. Our buddy Yakov showing up here. I always enjoy Yakov's questions, always delving into the past. Yakov, ever met Woody, Bo, Bobby Bowden, Bernie Kosar? Steve?
Oh, man. I think I did meet Woody Hayes. He came and spoke at our high school back in the mid-'80s. And so I would say yes on that. I don't know that I was ever around Bo. I was around Bobby Bowden for the Florida State-Ohio State Sugar Bowl back in '97. Bernard J. Kosar, have I ever met him? No, I did go watch the Browns play a few times when he was there. Probably sat in on a couple of his post-game press conferences, a couple of the games I covered up there. But no, can't say that I've really been around him. His brother, Brian, was one of the investors in Scout, which was an old network that we used to be a part of way back 20 years ago. So I did get to meet his brother, Brian, who was a really good guy, and, was really excited about what we were starting to do in terms of, Bucknuts and working with the Scout network years ago. And but that's probably the closest I've probably gotten to him. But yeah, I did meet Woody. I mean, Woody was, really before my time. I mean, I didn't go to college till '86, and he passed away in March of '87. So, it really wasn't a lot of time that he and I were going to cross paths. And of course, Bo was pretty much out of the sport, by the '90s. So, there just weren't many opportunities for me to meet those folks.
I have never. I did look to see how much it would cost to for a cameo for Bernie Kosar to wish my sister and brother-in-law a happy birthday or anniversary rather. It was like $250, and it just I didn't want to wish it for them that much. I could just send a text instead. So have not met any of them most well before my time. I did, however, meet several Cleveland Browns players way back in the 80s when they had a charity basketball game against like some local celebrities in the Napoleon, Ohio gymnasium. Reggie Langhorne, a favorite of mine. You got to, get his autograph. A couple of others that are slipping my mind, but he was the most famous. I don't think there was a Hanford Dixon or a Frank Minifield there. There was a couple of like an offensive lineman or defensive lineman. Nothing special. I almost got trampled. That's how things roll in Northwest Ohio.
I'm the same age as Steve. So these guys are before Steve's time. I guess I'll say the same, although I did watch Woody's final 2 games for sure. I kind of remember the 76 game, but I do definitely remember watching 77, 78, Woody's 2 final games at Ohio State. But no, I did never met Woody Hayes, Bo Schembechler, or Bobby Bowden. But much like Steve just mentioned, I interned for the ABC station in Akron, Ohio that no longer exists. And in the fall of 1990, it was rather an interesting season for the Browns. They were horrible after being good for about 5 or 6 seasons. And Bernie Kosar was a hero in Cleveland, but he was just at the outset, even though Belichick was not there yet, of that diminishing skills period. And so he was playing awful. Todd Philcox was getting some time, and I was in the scrum several times after some Browns games, interviewing Bernie Kosar, and got my couple questions in that were either genius or stupid. I don't remember. But the other thing I remember about that internship, at least involving the NFL, there were a lot of good stories involving that internship, but involving the NFL, was sitting on the roof of Cleveland Municipal Stadium. Actually, on the roof, and our cameraman was in there near a little cockpit type thing, but there was an NFL Films guy right next to us. And this dude was just amazing. He had like dozens of these little cartridges. He was just popping them in constantly, and great respect for NFL Films and the work that they've done. So no, never met Bernie Kosar, but like Steve, asked him a few questions after football games. All right. Appreciate you all being here at the Voice of College Football. This is our Wednesday deal with Steve and with Tony. And also keep in mind, it's Big Ten Media Days next week. So follow what these guys have going and follow us here at the Voice of College Football. And we will get together with Steve and Tony, hopefully some point next week. Now, what I am searching for is, you will want to take note of this, Ohio State fans. Let me find it. Here we go. So what we have here is that our Ohio State and Michigan channels are doing rather well in some instances, but they launched at these particular times. You've got the Ohio State launch in December of 2016. You got the Michigan launch. I can get rid of StreamYard, needs to do something different with their graphics deal, but a year and a half was the lead that Ohio State had on Michigan in terms of channels here at the Voice of College Football. Kind of the reversal is what we're setting up here. The reversal of the actual series is that Ohio State had a big lead in terms of being founded here on the Voice of College Football. And those are the lifetime stats. So Ohio State's got a nice lead there, but here recently, Michigan has gained almost 1,100 subs, at Ohio State under 500 here in 2024. And I wouldn't want to give you the specifics on the revenue generated at the Michigan channel versus the Ohio State channel. And lo and behold, our Michigan guys over there, whom I appreciate and love, they're doing a great job on the Michigan channel. They've taken hold of it. I no longer have to host the Michigan show, but they are taunting Ohio State fans with that every show. And if you're not familiar, that is Kenneth Grant, who's a Michigan defensive tackle who tracked down a Penn State running back. I don't remember if it was Nate Singleton or if Nick Singleton or Keytron Allen. But anyway, Kenneth Grant is going to do the same to Ryan Day, having been back in the subscriber count by 1,500, 2,000. They're down to 730, and they are tracking down Ryan Day. So that is...
I like that they do the math for everybody. That's helpful.
They do the math. You got to do the math for Michigan fans.
I didn't say it, Mark. I just put it out there, and then you knocked
put
it out of the park.
Now, that doesn't mean I wouldn't say that about all college football fans. I just, or many college football fans. But so Ohio State fans, please step up, do your part, subscribe to the channel. Everything's a competition. Steve says that from time to time. Everything's a competition between these two. So let's make this a competition.
They have the blood drive every year before the game where, it's Ohio State students versus Michigan students and fans. And yeah, so it is always a competition. And as Urban Meyer says, keeping track of it, why not win it?
Yes, sir. I think for Ohio State fans, there's just kind of a general gun shy situation right now where I think if they win their first 7, 8, 9 games, they're going to be coming out of the woodwork in droves and saying, see, I told you we were going to win it this year, but everyone's cautiously optimistic after the close calls that have happened. I mean, you look at the Georgia game 2 years ago. I mean, that goes, one play goes bad and, everything goes awry there. So, I just look at it that Ohio State fans right now are cautiously optimistic, but trying to, protect their heart, protect their fragile hearts right now because everything that they've banked on the last 3 years, it hasn't worked out real well.
We know what Michigan fans are going to say if Ohio State wins that game in November. They're just going to say, well, we won the 3 before that, so it doesn't really matter. You're still down 3-1.
Yeah. Yeah, Ohio State's going to have to hustle this decade to win the decade. So, it's not gotten off to a good start.
They could catch up this year with those 3 if everything goes right for Ohio State and just wrong enough for Michigan.
So I had some fun a couple of weeks ago. I posted a short, and I simply wanted people to, I have no idea who's watching, how old they are, but I simply wanted them to put in the comment section, what is the series record during your lifetime? That's all I asked. And
the people old enough to have a winning record are too old to use the internet. So for the Michigan fans, what would you have to be? I used to have this spreadsheet. You'd have to be like 108 years old at this point, or maybe it's actually gone down a little bit because of the recent wins. Maybe it's like 94 years old.
Yeah, I did that calculation as well in the last couple of months. It's a long time before. And the thing is that I've had a lot of Michigan fans say, and I'll preface this by saying, you're the champions. You were the Big Ten champions 3 times over. You were the national champions. Yes, you are better right now. Okay, let's get that out of the way. But you can only count all time, or you can only count the last game. And they count the last 3. They can only count up to 3, I guess. So now they've got those. And apparently I'm cherry picking when I look at 70 years. That's the definition of cherry picking. However, I've tried to make the point at 61-52 that, again, that's all that matters apparently for these Michigan fans. But I've stated to them, now come on. Had you won the first 61 games in this series and lost the last 52, that doesn't put any I've tried to put context to the series record, and they go, doesn't matter. It's only 61-50. It's 61-50. So you're trying to tell me if you had lost the last 52 years in a row, that would not change your perception of what's going on?
No. I've seen enough. I've seen too much over the last few years. No.
Yes, I was told enough about what happened before I was born that
it would only cause more digging in, because that's all you have to latch onto then is the 61.
I also found this interesting, that Michigan has won 4 national championships before the forward pass was legal. Anything close to the modern forward pass. So the first forward pass thrown in college football was in 1910. And then but it was so detrimental for you to try a forward pass. You lost the football if you incompleted the pass. You could only throw it for 20 yards. You had to be 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage. You couldn't throw the ball in the end zone. That by 1913, they kind of cleaned it up, but it was still not the modern. But so considering I went to 1913 as the first reasonable forward pass you could throw in college football, And Michigan claims 4 national championships before a pretty integral part of the game was introduced. Now, what's also interesting about that is if you go through all these services that have named national championships, Penn State has 2 that they could claim. Auburn and LSU have championships that could be claimed but they refuse to claim them. They don't claim them. The only ones that are claiming national championships are the Princetons and Harvards in Michigan.
Well, I mean, you said it right there.
4 of them. 4.
The Harvard of the
Before you
West.
could throw a forward pass. And those are supposed to be legitimate.
You're talking about these rules, and I'm just wondering how many blown calls by the refs, because they certainly didn't have replay back then. It's like, no, that throw was 21 yards downfield, or the quarterback was 4 yards behind the line of scrimmage. He had gone too far up into the pocket. What a nightmare. And everything was black and white by then. Like, how can you even see anything?
Yeah, even in person.
It's just
It's all black
everything
and white.
I just view, like, it's all muddy. Like, how can you even see the lines at that point, in terms of like 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage or whatever?
I've had fun with some of that stuff. When I uncovered that last week, I was like, my goodness, you're claiming 4 national championships before a forward pass was thrown. We're not even playing the same sport here.
Sharon Moore would argue that point. He doesn't need a forward pass.
I guess if we all watch the Penn State game, that it's still being done today. All right. Well, Steve, it's off to Big Ten Media Days. What are people going to find there on Bucknuts?
Well, we're starting to already preview that with some questions that Ryan Day could face and some that Denzel Burke, who is going to be there, will face. Tony, who are the 2 other player reps? Do you know offhand? I know Denzel Burke is one of them.
Jack Sawyer to Mecca Ibuka, I believe.
Yeah, that sounds right. That's 3 pretty good representatives. I think of this program, 3 of the more accomplished guys that are coming back out of a wide group of accomplished guys that are coming back. And, it'll be interesting to see what the players have to say. Has this summer been everything that they hoped it would be in terms of getting ready for the season? Who are the younger players that are really starting to make that move? Maybe a 3rd-year sophomore or somebody like that who hasn't played a whole lot, who is now kind of positioned themselves to be a mainstay on this team. So we'll get into all that stuff next week when we're there in Indianapolis, and then we'll get to talk to some of the other players and coaches across this vast 18-team league to get kind of their feeling about it. Ohio State plays Oregon, so that'll be an interesting byplay. And there's probably a few of these guys. Emeka Ibuka, I know, was one of them who returned kicks when Ohio State played Oregon the first time around. So they'll be kind of interesting to kind of get their 2 cents on what they thought. Denzel Burke probably started against Oregon, as I recall, because he started the first game against Minnesota that year. So
Henderson too.
Yeah, so there's probably a lot of people that can kind of get into that rivalry and what it's going to look like. And this is a new era for college sports, and how are they working really hard to try and mitigate the human toll that a season like this is going to take. It's going to be something to see, I think.
Tony, before you go on what's going on there at Buckeye Huddle, Buckeye Weekly, somebody had mentioned earlier in the show in the chat something about captains. When will the captains be named? And I will extend on that to ask you guys, who do you think will be named or should be named?
Isn't it usually at mid-camp where they announce that? So sometime in August. Like, I don't think Day will say that we've got our ideas, but they don't. When do they hold their vote? Is it like early in camp, or it's just one of these things that happens during the course of camp with everything being a blur?
Probably about the second week, probably about 10 days in, second week, they'll probably get into something like that. And
the representatives are usually a good idea. Like, who they send to the Big Ten Media Day is usually a pretty good idea on the captains as well.
Yeah, I'd say those 3 are probably pretty high on the list. Sawyer, Ibuka, and Burke. Perhaps Tui Maloau, Donovan Jackson over on the offensive line, I think would be a tremendous pick. A lot of people talk about G. Scott as a spiritual leader for this team, and potentially he's a guy that players may vote for. So I think there's probably 6 pretty good candidates right there. Just have to think beyond that if there is anybody else. Lathan Ransom, perhaps, as an inspirational guy coming back and coming off injury, et cetera, might be a guy that you think about as well. So, yeah, those are probably a lot of the ones that I would look at. Maybe Travion Henderson as well.
Throw Cody Simon in there also.
Cody Simon, yeah.
So, yeah, they've got a number of different options that they'll choose from. I'm always interested to see, is it going to be 4 or is it going to be 8? Because when it's a bunch, people get mad because there's too many. Everybody gets a trophy. So we'll see how they choose it. Usually it's like if there's a delineation between like 4 and 5, like a significant drop off, they'll just stop it. But if like 6 or 7 guys all get relatively the same number of votes, they'll go ahead and throw them all in there. And also the coaches should always have their discretion to put somebody in there as well. And go back to like the Connor Cook thing. Like Mark D'Antonio should have just made him a captain way back when, in 2015 or whatever, when they had three captains and not one was the quarterback. So if you're looking to just avoid a story, you can throw somebody else out there too.
As our buddy Jackson Johnson is pointing out here, the race to 10,000 subs. So please subscribe here to the Buckeyes channel. Tony, what's going on there at Buckeye Huddle, Buckeye Weekly?
Buckeye Huddle just dropped a closer look at Dominic Kirk's freshman defensive end, looking at some film clips from his highlights from Huddle as well, writing about them. So you can find that at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Continuing my 50 for 50 series, previewing the season. Should be I'm going to be wrapping it up over in the next week. And then Buckeye Weekly, we dropped the Urban Meyer era players that we would throw on this year's team, which we talked about here last week. And then we might do another one this week talking about some various things. So Buckeye Weekly is the podcast. You can find that everywhere.
Good stuff. Steve, Tony, you guys have a good trip to Indy. And I understand there are other events going on in town that could make things a little messy possibly. And always got your traffic there in Indy.
The traffic getting to Indy is also the problem.
All right, folks, make it on back next week. We'll be here at some point. So please subscribe, hit that bell for the notifications to know when we go live for Buckeyes Live 277. Tony, Steve, have a great rest of your week.
All right. Take care.